Thanks for the kind introduction and the invitation to talk about smart city from an academic perspective, looking at the role of industry in this context. If possible, I would like to get a little bit of a feeling of who is in the audience. So would you mind to raise your hand, those of you who are from cities or from the public sector? Okay, and who's from industry, private sector? That's not so many, okay. So the majority is from the city side. Thanks very much. My research shows that industry more or less struggles in a similar way with the transformation process around smart city as cities do. Why is that? On the one hand, industry is doing business in cities, so you could say when cities grow, as we hear or heard over the past couple of days, business grows. Well, that would underline a linear assumption of the business framework that this would not change. Is this possible? Yes. Is this realistic? Well, let's see, maybe not so much. Only think of the technical evolution towards connectivity. The IoTS entails a cultural change. This has an impact on our business structures, and this trend is even accelerated with every digital native born into this world of connectivity and networks. So, sorry? I don't need this.
No, you don't need?
No, that's fine. Thank you. So, making sense of cities as marketplaces is not new. Thousands of years ago, cities grew on the basis of increased agricultural farming. The gained profits entailed specialists in administration, military crafts, and so on. At the same time, this specialization needed exchange, which was the cradle to trade. To trade, marketplaces and living closer together were beneficial, so consequently, cities are the result of the division of work on the one hand side and the use of scale. This early specialization manifested in the segments as we face them today, as well as on city side and on industry side. Sorting and clustering is a natural thing to do for handling growing complexity. There is no fixed order how to segment. Therefore, the variety of departments and specialists, the divisions we have, is huge on corporation as well as on industry side. However, it's not relevant for this discussion how exactly these structures look like. Important are two things which they have in common. A, it's that they are grown over time, and B, they have manifested specialist expertise with mostly siloed solutions. So the challenges that are posed are therefore addressed mostly in the segments in which they occur with siloed solutions. The guiding thought for the next couple of minutes, therefore, is the mechanism of segmented structures resilient enough for the challenges ahead? Oops. I'm looking at the business logic behind smart city projects. Therefore, it's out of scope what you see on segment-specific technological solutions. In scope of my research are four areas. A, the mechanisms amongst stakeholders. B, the indicators derived from these mechanisms that show the maturity of the market. The third one, what do these indicators mean particularly for industry, and what are their pain points with it? And last but not least, what conclusions can we draw from this? Looking at the mechanisms. In the past, and to a vast extent up to now, cities analyzed and specified their needs themselves, maybe with the help of a consultant. Could be an external one, could be an internal one. They did the planning themselves and set out a tender. Only then industry came into play by providing the products, say hardware, software, services, whatever. Now this slowly changes. On the one hand side, cities leave their enclosure and invite industry to come up with ideas how to use, for example, I'm from Germany, we have a lot of conversion land. How to use this conversion land? What could we do on this free spaces? And how to improve the aging infrastructure with modern technology. On the other hand, industry actively approaches cities, and here are only two examples from industry players which call it, for example, it's a workshop, topic radar smart city, or with the Smarter Cities Challenge, which you probably all heard of already. This way, industry takes over traditional segments in the value chain of cities. They try to own as much of the value chain as possible to come out of the position of a sheer product supplier, which is quite important to them as the commoditization of products in our global world increases, and they actually need some differentiation in order to secure their business and portfolio. Looking at the general and academic discussion, next, scholarly publications only picked up in 2010. If you do a research on the Scopus database, for example, you see that 2004 to 8, we had around 2 to maybe 3 publications. In 2010, it picked up to 30 publications. In 2011, it was more than 100, and in 2012, it doubled to nearly 200 publications on the topic smart cities. Most papers, however, take an architectural perspective or are talking about city planning, or they describe segment-specific solutions or city examples rather than developing an understanding of what processes and structures are needed to achieve smart targets. Also, this is reflected in the context when you've been to various conferences. Also, the focus of the talks there shift. These circumstances can be summarized in the definitions of smart city, where you see hardly any change. And I picked 4 examples here. I'm not going to read these to you, but over the past 2 decades, more or less, from 1990, where smart city first came up, to 2000, the focus was clearly on technology. If you take 2010, it gets the aspect of economy, and just recent example, you also see that the political dimension is kicking in now. This is one indicator of the immaturity of this young-old market. This map I borrowed from McKinsey. So another indicator is the type of projects. In this map, I'm not going to go into all these details. What I would summarize is there are 3 types of projects. One is the just fix it, quickly fix my problem, and as cities do use current technology, which is digitized, it's a smart solution and therefore a smart city. The second type is let's try a pilot. There are there's funding money out there, and so there is a chance to familiarize with the technology, but there's hardly any vision or master plan behind the whole approach. And the third type is really the holistic planned and sustainable approach with a clear long-term vision, a master plan, a dedicated responsibility, and a fundamental change of operations. The research I'm doing shows that besides the slow evolvement of definitions and beyond the technology focus, as well as the sometimes opportunistic project approach. There are other indicators, the change of funding policy, for example. Those of you who have been to the EU presentation yesterday, they learned that the EU focused on, 2 or 3 years ago, to either sponsor transport or energy. The previous year, they focused on the synergy of both, plus the addition of ICT. And now, as we learned yesterday, for 2014 and 15, they are looking for scale-up solutions. So that's a change of how projects are funded. Don't get me wrong, the stimulus funding is essential for seeding pilot projects. However, the increasing number of projects so far does not see planning beyond pilots. The growing number of segment solutions does not see an actionable master plan. The majority of projects is co-financed, which shows no sustainable business case. And the many projects are set up in PPP or private or joint ventures. However, there's hesitation on industry to collaborate. And industry is aware, of course, that the challenges that derive from cities as a system of subsystems can only be solved in a holistic and collaborative way. However, although there is hesitation of industry to collaborate, they do engage in pilots. What is the motivation? They invest in pilots to gain insights into the market, which they are not on a broad level familiar with, learn about the customer smart city, learn about the mechanisms and their needs. They want to enhance product development and network with other industry players. The overall goal, of course, is to create sustainable business, gain market insights in this young market in order to increase market share, which is easier in a young market than in an established one. Based on various interviews, the smart city requirements are hard to deliver by an individual company. As ICT is the key competence, equipment providers try to fill this gap either organically or by acquisition. So, coming to my last slide, smart city is not about new technology in my eyes. It's not primarily about connectivity in a technological sense, and it's not about segment-specific solutions in the long term. Sustainable cities or city solutions are a combination of already existing products implemented in a collaborative way across so far segmented structures within corporations, across industry and municipality internally. So the technological connectivity seeks equivalence in organizational structures that enable financial planning beyond pilots, to motivate stakeholders to leave their product enclosure and benefit from enabling the big idea. And last but not least, therefore, city as well as industry need to A, create a joint vision and master plan that leads to this big idea, B, enable holistic solutions by setting up dedicated and empowered city forces, and C, restructure sales incentive systems as a motivator for going for the big picture. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, María, is Rozas smart cities when you provide services to your inhabitants?
La Rozas intenta ser una ciudad inteligente, pero con la intervención que hemos tenido de la experta de la universidad, que yo estoy bastante de acuerdo. Creo que el tema de Smart City no está suficientemente maduro, ni desde el punto de vista de las ciudades, ni desde el punto de vista de la industria. Pero la pregunta que le quería hacer, Andrea, es: ¿considera que la tecnología y la industria está apostando por soluciones estándar que sean eficientes? Porque si nos dan soluciones a medida a cada una de las ciudades, no van a ser rentables ni eficientes. Entonces, ¿se está apostando de alguna manera por soluciones estándar que a todos no sean rentables? Las ciudades están pensando en soluciones también no imaginativas, sino reales, donde se apueste, se saque rentabilidad a la medida que estamos haciendo, porque si estamos poniendo soluciones informáticas para medir, pero dedicamos más dinero a medir que al resultado que queremos obtener, pues no me parece factible. Entonces, ¿de verdad las ciudades son responsables a la hora de hablar de Smart City y la industria está yendo a soluciones estándar que sean rentables y eficientes?
Podemos guardar la cuestión después de las intervenciones. Y ahora tú no podrías presentar lo que hacen en las Rozas en el tema de la provisión de servicios públicos a los habitantes de la ciudad. Gracias.
Buenos días. Soy del Ayuntamiento de Las Rozas y les voy a decir Las Rozas dónde está, porque muchos de ustedes no sabrán ni dónde está. Las Rozas es una ciudad de unos 100.000 habitantes, cerca de Madrid, a unos 25 kilómetros de Madrid, con una población muy joven, de unos 44 años de media de edad, familiar, en una ciudad muy residencial, donde las personas que suelen ser bastante profesionales trabajan en la capital de España. Y digo todo esto porque al final es muy importante saber cómo es nuestro ciudadano y nuestro cliente al que nos dirigimos para implementar el modelo de ciudad del que vamos a hablar. Los modelos de ciudad tradicionales son modelos de ciudad donde no van enfocados fundamentalmente al cliente, donde están desintegradas la forma de ver los servicios que ofrecemos y generalmente son ineficientes. Ahora, cuando nos planteamos la Smart City, yo creo que primero hay que plantearse cuál es el nuevo modelo de ciudad que queremos. Porque de nada queremos una ciudad tecnológica o informatizada si no somos capaces de orientar la ciudad a un modelo que sea eficiente. Por lo tanto, nosotros consideramos que tenemos que alinear el ayuntamiento, el modelo de gestión de ciudad, el modelo de gestión de servicios para llegar a nuestro cliente o nuestro ciudadano, que es lo más importante. En este sentido, el modelo de gestión de ciudad que nosotros pretendemos va orientado al ciudadano, con un centro que es el centro de nuestro modelo, con una visión global de ciudad y con una colaboración público-privada. Y para nosotros esto es fundamental, la colaboración público-privada. Creemos que la Administración no tiene por qué ser experta en gestionar ciudades, en cómo se deben de ofrecer los servicios, cómo debe ser la maquinaria, cómo deben gestionarse los recursos humanos. Lo que sí que tenemos que tener claro es cuál es nuestra estrategia, hacia dónde vamos a orientar esa ciudad. Y la tenemos que orientar hacia el hábito del que vive en ella. Por eso, los servicios que ofrezcamos tienen que ser centrados en ese ciudadano y nosotros vamos a explicar aquí cómo los hemos centrado. Para nosotros, lo primero que tenemos que ver es cómo vamos a ofrecer los servicios y qué hemos hecho en Las Rozas. Las Rozas lo que hemos hecho es que primero, a nivel de estructura organizativa del ayuntamiento, hemos creado una única concejalía desde donde se integran todos los servicios de ciudad. ¿Para qué? Para tener una visión global y poder analizar los procesos. Los procesos tienen que ser eficientes, con lo cual hemos integrado todos los servicios, hemos sacado un concurso público y en ese concurso público una empresa, la empresa está aquí presente, se llama Orbaser, es del grupo ACS, pues ha sido la adjudicataria del concurso que hemos sacado y hemos integrado todos los servicios de forma que a cada metro cuadrado que vaya un servicio a ofrecerse, pues va a ir la misma empresa que de forma polivalente va a ofrecer los servicios. De esta manera conseguimos sinergias, conseguimos ahorros. Y ahora, y una vez que tenemos ese proceso de alguna manera eficiente, es cuando hablamos de la tecnología. La tecnología para nosotros es fundamental. El recoger los datos de los que estamos hablando en la ciudad es fundamental. Estamos trabajando y tenemos un inventario donde está la ciudad digitalizada sobre un GIS, donde están todos los elementos de la ciudad, donde sabemos en qué momento, qué elementos tenemos, de qué marcas son, cómo les vamos a mantener, cómo les vamos a estructurar, cómo podemos hacer y tener el conocimiento orientado de esa ciudad. Estamos instalando cámaras, las cámaras van orientadas al tráfico, pero esas cámaras orientadas al tráfico queremos que sean algo más, que sean algo que nos dé un tratamiento de la imagen y que la imagen no solamente sirva para el tráfico, sino pueda servirnos para el mantenimiento de la ciudad de forma automatizada. O sea, que la imagen, a través del reconocimiento de la imagen, nos esté diciendo si una fuente no funciona, si un parque no está bien mantenido, etcétera, etcétera. Y con todos estos datos y a través de los conceptos de Big Data, poder tener la información suficiente y el conocimiento para mantener lo que nosotros llamamos el Smart Service, que al final es que ofrecer un servicio inteligente a nuestro ciudadano. Pero esto no tiene mucho sentido si no somos capaces de tener una retroalimentación o un feedback de lo que está pasando en la ciudad y cómo lo percibe el cliente. Y esto estamos implementando un sistema, una solución informática que a través de una app el ciudadano va y ve, está viendo qué está pasando en la ciudad, nos manda una incidencia y nosotros le contestamos en un tiempo de respuesta rápido si esa incidencia ha sido arreglada, de forma que podamos conocer cuáles son las deficiencias que tenemos en la ciudad. Pero nosotros, la verdad es que creo que tenemos los pies en el suelo. Para nosotros el Smart City es algo que es muy concreto, con una plataforma única, integrada y que dé solución externalizada desde fuera del ayuntamiento a través de alarmas de conocer 2 o 3 servicios solo, como es el mantenimiento de la ciudad, el alumbrado para ser más eficientes energéticamente, el riego y pocas cosas más. Estamos empezando solamente por esos pilares. No queremos automatizarlo todo, queremos centrarnos en 2 o 3 servicios que para nosotros nos sean rentables, que nos den información que para el mantenimiento de nuestra ciudad sea rentable y eficiente, porque considero que si no son rentables las cosas, es imposible mantenerlas en un futuro. Por lo tanto, queremos obtener unos resultados. Para nosotros, sinergias. Las sinergias es un tema fundamental, por eso hemos sacado un concurso integral, donde una empresa se hace cargo de todo el mantenimiento. ¿Por qué? Porque el personal, por ejemplo, tiene que ser polivalente y cuando va a un parque limpia la papelera, quita la mala hierba, se ocupa de que los columpios funcionen, o sea, todas las cuestiones con una orientación fundamental del hábito del cliente. No queremos hacer un mantenimiento de la ciudad si el ciudadano no es partícipe de ello. Con lo cual, con esa polivalencia, con esa colaboración público-privada, con esas sinergias y con el pago por indicadores de calidad, nosotros en el concurso público no hemos pedido que la empresa ponga una serie de recursos, que es lo que hace toda la administración pública. Somos el primer ayuntamiento en España que saca un concurso donde mide por resultados. Nosotros, lo único que hemos dicho en el concurso es: esta es nuestra ciudad, usted, desde el punto de vista privado, díganos cuál es el modelo más eficiente para gestionar nuestra ciudad y le vamos a pagar en función de unos indicadores de calidad. Hemos descrito una serie de unos 50 indicadores de calidad, donde medimos con unas personas que están midiendo todo el tiempo la ciudad si esos indicadores se cumplen, si la ciudad está limpia, si la ciudad está correcta, y pagamos en función de ese resultado. De esta manera, incorporando la tecnología, queremos que ahorrarnos dinero también en esa inspección de ciudad, y a través de la imagen, como les decía, no creemos mucho en sembrar sensores por la ciudad. Habrá algunos que haya que poner porque no quede otro remedio, tendrán que ser multifunción, pero no creemos que ya tenemos bastante con mantener los árboles para mantener también los sensores. Y con los resultados que hemos obtenido hasta ahora es un 40% de ahorro. Un 40% de ahorro sobre lo que veníamos haciendo. Antes había 10 o 15 empresas que mantenían la ciudad, ahora hay una, se comporta de esta manera y le evaluamos por resultados. Y con este 40% de ahorro que hemos conseguido, lo hemos reinvertido en mejoras de la ciudad, siempre con la perspectiva del ciudadano. Nos parece fundamental estudiar el hábito del ciudadano y no limpiar una ciudad sobre limpia ni mantener una ciudad que no hace falta mantener, sino ir a lo que el ciudadano desea. De esta manera centramos nuestro mensaje y esta es nuestra línea de trabajo. Las Rozas Smart Green. Nuestra ciudad tiene el 50% de su superficie, casi 6.000 hectáreas tenemos, que son zonas naturales. Y queremos que una ciudad sea viva y sostenible desde todos los puntos de vista. Y para nosotros esto es la inteligencia de una ciudad, no poner sensores. La inteligencia de una ciudad es orientar la ciudad al hábito de su cliente, que sea medioambientalmente sostenible, económicamente rentable y socialmente aceptable. Y no sé cuánto tiempo me queda. 3 minutos. Les voy a poner un vídeo que dura solo 1,5 para que vean cómo es nuestra ciudad y lo que estamos haciendo. Espero que sea de su interés. Gracias.
Diseñamos un modelo de ciudad sostenible y eficiente con un eje central, el ciudadano. Disponemos de la más completa red de comunicaciones y transportes. Potenciamos la movilidad urbana fomentando el uso de la bicicleta. Naturaleza. Espacios abiertos al ocio y deporte al aire libre. Infraestructuras y equipamientos. Compromiso y eficacia. Un único objetivo: calidad de vida. Grandes superficies comerciales y empresas líderes han decidido ubicar su sede en el municipio. 40.000 hogares con banda ancha para una ciudad joven, familiar, creativa y siempre apostando por el futuro. La administración ha cambiado su relación con el ciudadano y se adapta al ritmo de la ciudad. El ayuntamiento, como responsable de su conservación y mantenimiento, desarrolla un nuevo modelo de gestión buscando sinergias e integrando servicios evaluados por indicadores de calidad. Como resultado, eficiencia y ahorro, respetando los hábitos y necesidades del ciudadano. Las Rozas en un clic, una innovadora aplicación para smartphones que establece una participación proactiva del ciudadano. Enviando un mensaje con textos y fotos, se podrá comunicar una incidencia de manera ágil e inteligente. Esa incidencia es gestionada y su resolución es comunicada al ciudadano. Entre todos, podemos hacer de Las Rozas una ciudad mejor. Ahora, todo más fácil. Las Rozas en un clic. Ayuntamiento de Las Rozas.
Muy bien. Muchas gracias. Kari, first, before you present your city, a short reaction about the presentation of Andrea, please, and after you can explain what you are doing in Tampere.
Okay, at the thanks. Both the presentations of Andrea and Maria were very nice. I agree with Andrea's big picture that you need a master plan, strategy, or something else, and the smart city cannot be that of just individual choices, etc. And I kind of like your idea of that the cities are changing, and they are changing towards being more as a facilitator and a platform for making business than has been the case before. And Maria's talk also confirmed that yes, you need a vision, you need a plan, and also pointed out what is important for the cities in the smart city discussion. The provision of services for the citizens has to be improved, and that is kind of the main goal for the cities, that it has to be a better place for the citizens, and then all added to that is kind of extra bonus.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Whoops. Hello, everybody. I come from a small city. We are not the Premier League of the smart cities. We are not Barcelona or Berlin or Rio. We are kind of the middle class. City of 200,000 people and not much more. We are like, much like La Rosa in the previous talk. And it is an interesting thing to kind of discuss what kind of implications the smaller cities have in this discussion of the smart city. Because there are only, 126 cities that are above 1 million people in the Metropolis network. There must be thousands of cities that are about our size. So but the questions and implications are very different from those of the larger cities. Also the questions and the means and the resources, etc. Finland is such a small country, 5 million altogether, that not only have we city strategies, but we can also have a smart city national strategy. And this is now currently taking off, and our city is coordinating the smart city section of that innovative city development. A good city should be good at integrating things, and smart city, as we have heard throughout this week, is something that is encompassing a lot, all kinds of things. I personally like to think that the smart city is not an absolute that we have, but more like a development paradigm. It has all the regional development elements that the traditional development stuff has. It is only emphasizing the mobility, the sustainability, and now more recently the openness of the society. And whether it's a smart city, whether it's a shared city, whether it's an open city, you have all these elements, living economy, administration and services, environment and infrastructure and transport, etc. And then you kind of can start looking at that and start making a strategy, because the strategy that the city is making will encompass all those things anyway. And then you cannot kind of escape the Lego play. You need to have the building blocks to build the smart city. You need to have the vision from which you deduct the solutions. For the solutions that you need to have the relevant elements. And for that, to the realization, you need the partners. And although it's called a smart city, the smartness of that, to my mind, in great way, is partially or greatly dependent actually on the fact that the city does not do everything. It's the companies, the individuals, etc. So there we actually come to an interesting question of governance. Who governs if you have the companies, the universities, the public sector, and the individual? You don't even have a triple helix, you have a quadruple helix that comes into play. And then when you start building it, this is a picture that you can't read, but it's our model for the land policy, land development, land use, land construction, etc. And instead of doing just pilots, we've had our share of the pilots. We are aiming for systemic changes in the way the city works, in the way the whole city area is built and developed. And this is just one example. We have similar plans for the services and other walks of life. And why we do that? We do that because we want our city to be the people's city, accessible by all kinds of transportation means. You can even see our mayor there biking. And it's a connected city. So yes, although we have a big plan, we realize that in bits and pieces. It's a connected city. We are enhancing our public transport and actually in a process of procuring for a tram. It's a densifying city instead of an urban sprawl, although Richard Florida said that the vertical sprawl is equally bad as is the horizontal sprawl. We still believe that we can densify and grow up a little bit. Moving has to be smart. This slide indicates the various partners that we have in all these activities that we do. We have the tech suppliers, we have the consultants, we have the companies, we have the system organization, we have the city as an enabler, we have the research companies, etc. And yes, renewable energy is important, and we're aiming to do that with the city power utilities. Yes, technology is important. It is driving the city. It is a thing that drives change or enables change, not necessarily drives change. And yes, it's an innovative city. And I finished my talk by inviting you to something. We're a small city, but we have a lot of students. About 1/6 of our population is students. 40,000 students are 220,000 people, which is good. Us old people don't need to have any good ideas because the young kids have them. With them, we have devised novel innovation platforms that are open environments for all to join. And that comes from rethinking the innovation, providing random collision places for the ideas to meet and develop. This is something that we all have in all cities: research institutes, universities, incubators, living labs, development agencies, etc. And the company wants to seek information or knowledge from that. Very difficult. We have a simple thing going on for the past 4 years. These are the results that it has created. This year, over the course of the years, it has created some 300 demonstrations, some 50 companies that have raised some $20–30 million in venture capital. And it is a tool where the companies provide the ideas, universities and students take that and work on that, and it's very inexpensive. It's a very positive way of collaborating with the universities for the companies, because it happens through the students, and it is useful. And we have this running currently, not only in Tampere, but in 5 other countries. And this is my invitation to you. Although this is not all the smart city stuff we do, as I hope you saw from my talk, this is something that we kind of like. And it's a nice tool, and it has proved to be successful for the companies that provide the ideas. So anyone interested, talk to me after the show. But thank you. I finish here, and yeah.
Good. Thank you very much. So, be careful. Be careful. So, 3 presentation, and we have a key word in our panel, the governance. What means governance? It's clear. In the case of La Rosa or Tampere, the municipality is here to give the way, to propose a solution, and after, the citizens are able to enjoy the city. And Andrea also explained that when we speak about master plan, that means that we have a governance. We have anybody who is looking about a future. Jim, what do you think about the world of governance?
I think the world of governance is a very complex one. But let me, boy, it's amazing standing up here. You can't see anyone. Again, my name is Jim Waring. I'm from San Diego, California. And I'm currently the executive chairman of a nonprofit organization called Clean Tech San Diego. And I thought I would take a slightly different approach to the conversation and take it a little more at a macro level. Now, Clean Tech San Diego was formed 6 years ago. Just prior to that, I worked for the city of San Diego, and one of the departments that I ran was economic development. So we said, if the world's going to change, if we're going to have smart cities, if we're going to have sustainability, that's essential, in my opinion, for the future of humanity. But if you're going to sustain sustainability, which means it's a multi-decade, huge undertaking involving billions of people, it has to have an economic underpinning. It can't work because it needs to be done. It has to be worked in a way that recognizes the realities of humanity, and the reality of humanity is that people struggle to survive, to clothe themselves, to feed their children, and to house themselves. So you have to engage huge economic systems if you're going to meet these needs and sustain it through political cycles. So we have about 105 members. It's about 70 or 75 members are private companies, and the others are a variety of NGOs, governments, the county, the cities, the airport, the port. So we have a very diverse makeup. So that led me, in thinking about this panel, to the issue of governance. And I'm going to define governance as active involvement of a government entity. And I'd like to start by posing, I'm going to make two statements. One statement is that there can be no smart, sustained economic development without the active involvement of government. So that means it cannot happen without the involvement. And the other statement is that government being what it is, there can be no sustained, smart economic development with the active involvement of government. So, how many people here think the first statement is true? You cannot have sustained economic development without the active participation of government. Okay? And how many people think the second statement is true, that if government actively participates, you will not have sustained, smart economic development? Okay, so very much fewer people. Now, it's a little bit of a trick question, because in my opinion, the answer is both statements are correct. The real challenge that we have is people involved, whether a number of people here are from government, or whether you're with industry, or whether you're with NGOs. The real challenge is to understand what is the appropriate role of government and what is the inappropriate role of government. And then as leaders, to guide our government agencies to fill that appropriate role. So what do I mean by that? I really believe that the key, absolutely indispensable role of government is to establish policies, to establish goals. Ideally, you want those goals to be established as close to your community as possible. So depending upon the governance structure of where you're from, that might be a standard set by your city, or maybe a province or a state or a national government. Now, if you look at the US today, the US national government is largely incapable of adopting big, complex policy issues because of the political issues. So that's okay. Then it reverts to the states. So in the state of California, which is very progressive, I will give you an example of a policy that has driven an enormous amount of economic response that creates a social good. We adopted in 2006 Assembly Bill 32. It's just called AB 32. AB 32 set a greenhouse gas reduction target for the state of California to reduce to 1990 levels by 2020. That policy has driven an enormous response for renewable energy deployment. The city of San Diego has the highest penetration of rooftop solar of any place in the country. It led the evolution to electric vehicles. And again, California is the leader in electric vehicles. We happen to have the most electric vehicles per capita. So those were responses to that policy statement. The other thing that was done at the state level was an establishment of a renewable portfolio standard that stated as a policy 1/3 of the state's energy has to come from renewable resources by 2020. Well, as a result of that, large-scale solar, large-scale wind have been rapidly deployed. In the case of San Diego, as a consequence of that rule, a French company called Soitec, was a German subsidiary that made concentrated solar arrays. The parent company is French, the subsidiary is German, has opened a factory in San Diego to build the concentrated panels because our local utility said, if you're going to deploy in our community, we want you to build there, a local content requirement. So these big policy statements stimulated the markets and the communities to respond. But at the same time, we've learned that government does a really bad job of picking specific outcomes, of deciding which company will deliver which type of service or good. I've heard a lot at this conference talk about open platforms and flexible platforms. Absolutely essential, because government isn't structured, it isn't capable of making those selections. Now let me give an example. I mentioned AB 32, and again, that's the greenhouse gas reduction standard for the state of California. That's a general policy. In 2006, when Governor Schwarzenegger signed that law, there was a part of it that said California would adopt a cap and trade standard. Now, at the time the governor signed that, there were conversations going on with the 8 big western states in America and 2 provinces of Canada, and you didn't have the same gridlock in Washington. So at the time that this was adopted as a tool, as a specific tool, there was a factual reason to believe it might help implement this. But time moves on, and 18 months ago, when California launched its cap and trade, all of the western states had dropped out. The provinces of Canada had dropped out. So California was alone trying to do a cap and trade. Now, no matter how big California is with 37.5 million people, and no matter how progressively like to be, no single place can really have a cap and trade policy. And yet, that tool was adopted by government, imposed on the system, and it is having enormous complexities with companies that say, gee, I can't do cap and trade, I can't afford to buy the credits, so I'm going to move literally my production from San Diego 5 miles south into Mexico, and then I'll do the same activity in Mexico. I'll do the same activity in Arizona or Texas. And let's face it doesn't matter where you produce carbon. It's irrelevant. So if we're just moving it around, we're not doing anything. So that is an example of government trying to be too specific. So what I have learned both in government and outside of government is that if you don't have this enlightened leadership, which just pushes the envelope by setting the targets, then people will not respond. People won't think of it, they won't be creative, they won't take risk. But if government can set a high bar and then essentially just get out of the way and let the marketplaces respond, then you'll have the type of innovation and the type of development and the type of progressive activity that we are enjoying in California that's producing benefits at many levels. Now, that doesn't mean that all government does is write down a target, 20% greenhouse gas reduction by 2020, and then turns it back on it. There is an ongoing month in, day in, year out role for government that's essential. And that is, once your body politic has adopted a big standard, has held out this big challenge, it has a duty to look within its own structure and say, okay, we want to have this target. What is it in our governance structure, in our rules, and our regulations, and our processes that interfere with achieving that outcome? And identify those objectively, dispassionately, with an open mind, and then get rid of those restrictions. So if we want to have mobility that we've heard a lot of talk about, then the traffic engineers have to analyze speed per kilometers per hour on roadways, or miles per hour on roadways, in order to adapt the roads, say, for bicycles, to provide the extra lanes. If we say we want our buildings to be more efficient, the building departments have to look at every one of their regulations that go back to the 50s, 60s, 70s. I mean, these are ancient regulations, and decide which of those regulations are in conflict with the goals. So, in conclusion, I don't believe we can do any of this at scale without government. And again, that's a combination of, in a perfect world, we'd have an international standard, but certainly national standards. You have regional standards like the European Union, of course, but then you go into your states, your provinces, and your cities, wherever you have to do it. Set the standards and set the bars, and then as people in government and people in industry work together to knock down all of your barriers that have grown up, that people don't even think about, that have grown up over the decades, that interfere with where you are today and where you want to be. And that, to me, is the role of governance, and properly executed, I think the potential for achieving our smart cities, our smart planet, a sustainable world go up exponentially. Thank you.
Thank you. Andrea, after the presentation of our colleague, do you have a comment or some remarks before we open the discussion with our colleagues on the floor?
Well, I have one. I have one. Yeah. I quite liked to hear that Tampere has this vision in place already, and also you have a vision in place and set up really concrete approaches how to get there. When you posed the question earlier, which of the two statements is the right one, I also had to admit that it's the balance in between. So that's, yeah.
Okay. Some question from the room. There is a light. So, please, microphone.
Thank you, Alain. My question is to the previous speaker. You mentioned earlier about the leadership, that how vital is the leadership in the cities, and how you quoted an example of your governor of the state who made some tangible differences in your cities.
Yeah,
when we see the deficiency in the city leadership is quite obvious, the capacity at the global level is the real problem. We can't make these leaders overnight. We can't make them to understand the real issues of the cities as a holistic challenge. They see as a political challenge, and the real challenge is how am I going to get elected after 3 or 4 years, depending on the situation. What is your view that we can make this leadership and the issue of capacity in the leadership as a fast-track process, because urbanization is not going to wait, and we don't have next 10 years to make some real, important and credible leaders or visionary leaders for our cities. So just keen to hear your views.
That's a particularly timely question to me, because yesterday we had an election for mayor in San Diego, and the candidate that I thought was best suited to have what I would call a progressive smart city agenda did not make it into the runoff. So I've been spending a lot of contemplative time over the last 24 hours thinking, because I know the other two candidates, about how we will work with them, how we will bring them along, and if we can't bring them along, how we will work around them. Because the ultimate political reality is that you have what you have, and you have to adapt. And another way, so then that's the city answer. But I also say, if your city isn't giving you the leadership you want, again, I'll use our California governance structure. The city's not giving it to you, then look for your county. Look for the slightly bigger place and try to get your political consensus there. If you can't get it in your county, go to your state. So with Governor Brown, for example, we have a very open, accessible, progressive governor who's leading a lot of these. So my opinion is you go wherever you have to go to find the political support to message what you're trying to do, because ultimately this is a message about the future. And so if one door is closed, then open the other door. And if all the doors are closed, make a new door. I don't know how else to do it.
Kari, very short, because the organizer said that the time is...
From a city point of view, when you are with the city and work in the city, you can't go around and you can't avoid the political decision makers, but you can educate them. You can argue with them, you can take them further, and we in Tampere have been very lucky. There have been previous people who've been educating our decision makers, and it has been working and it has proven results. Educating on the site, take them abroad, make them feel and see other places. It may work.
But that's the role of your robust NGO community, see,
Yep.
to do that bridge. You want to build a robust NGO community wherever you live to be this bridging. Sorry, boss.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, because the organizer said that we have to leave the room. Thank you to all of you for coming. Thank you for Kari, for Jim, for María, Jesús, and for Andrea. And well, see you the next year for the next Smart City Congress. Bye.